Welcome in, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I'm your co-host, Billy Muzio, and with me, as always, is Jody Smith. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Week 2 review. We're going to be reviewing Week 2. We're talking about players that we're buying and selling the hype on, and then we're going to be talking about Thursday Night Football heading into Thursday Night Football tonight, and we're going to be answering any start-sit questions that you have. So if you have any start-sit questions, go ahead and start typing them into the chat. We'll get to those here shortly. We're going to do our quick intro, and we'll come back and start talking about Week 2.
Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
Alrighty, we're back. Week 2 is in the books, Jody. We had some big games. We've had some major disappointments from players. I don't think we're quite ready yet to hit the emergency brake on some players, but there's definitely been some players who have been way outplaying their ADP that we had in drafts. Let's start at the quarterback position. Tua Tagovailoa. How'd I do on that last name today? I think I did pretty good. But Tua finished as the quarterback 2 in Week 2. With 40.86 fantasy points. That's right, 40 fantasy points for Tua. Are you buying or selling the hype here in Miami with Tua and the Dolphins?
Well, it's so hard. Like you said, it's only 2 weeks. So, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. That's only, what, 1/7 or 1/8 of the regular season. But, in this kind of business, we're kind of, everything is all about now and tomorrow, not the past. So, there's some players that, this week. So the Bears, Colt Kmet, Darnell Mooney, both guys that we really loved, and they're playing the Texans this week. So this is the kind of thing where it's like, okay, you give players like that one more week. But with Tua, the reason I kind of went off on that is because I multiple times this offseason wrote about how risky Tua was as quarterback because it was a new offense and he hadn't really shown us anything in his first 2 seasons that would indicate that he was fully capable of not just having a game like that, but being an above average quarterback over 16 weeks. But last week, he certainly showed it. I'm sure it's an outlier game, but I would say I feel like when you're looking at rest of season, we can't expect another 40-point game, which was bonkers because all that, and he didn't even finish as QB1. And if I'm not mistaken, there were like 3 or 4 wide receivers last week that were at 40 points, including 2 guys on his own team. So just what a wild week. And, I would say right now, if we're doing a draft, clearly he would be right on the cusp of QB1. So I guess you could say that I'm buying from the sense, but there's still he still has a lot to show when it comes to long term. Can he maintain this kind of thing? And when we're going to see this week when they play Buffalo, a very credible and the league's #1 defense, we'll see how he manages to do against them.
Yeah, very tough matchup this week. I think it's safe to say that Buffalo is just a tier in their own, not only on the offensive side of the ball, but also the defensive side of the ball. If you own them in fantasy, you're very happy with the results that you've been getting on the defensive side. So definitely an alarming matchup this week. If he can do it this week, I think he can do it any week. So I think this is a very telltale sign for Tua and heading into the rest of the season. The next quarterback I want to talk about is Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz right now is the #4 quarterback in fantasy. He was #5 last week, 28.78 fantasy points. Another player who has just smashed his ADP. And for those of you who waited at quarterback in best ball, Carson Wentz is looking like your savior as of right now. Are you buying or selling the hype right now on the Washington football team and Carson Wentz?
I would say sell. There's just no way that Carson Wentz is going to continue, in my opinion, to be a top 5 quarterback. I'd actually be really surprised if he ends up the season being a QB1. I was probably higher than the consensus on Carson Wentz coming into the season. It's not that I really wanted to go out of my way to target him. I felt like he was a good QB2. So I had him around in that QB 18 to 20 range, but he's just been playing lights out so far this season. It's not something that I necessarily think that Washington can keep up. I mean, you got to like what they did with Dotson has been really good, and we'll see how they do this week because Washington's taken on Philadelphia. We saw what Darius Slay could do to Justin Jefferson just on Monday night, so we'll see how Wentz and how the rest of Washington can overcome playing an actual solid secondary, and not to mention the whole revenge game factor for Carson Wentz. But I view him as the guy. He's off to a really hot start, and like I said, I think he can be a solid streaming option. But when all is said and done, he'll probably be somewhere between, say, QB 14 and 16 when the season's over.
I think that's where we had him in our rankings, was around that 15-16 range. That being said, this offense looks much better than I anticipated. Curtis Samuel has always been the key in this offense, and when healthy, when healthy, Curtis Samuel is one of the most dynamic receivers in the game. He's kind of a Debo Light, in my opinion, that hybrid running back and wide receiver role. But Carson Wentz been playing light out, 57 for 87 in the first 2 weeks, 65.5% completion percentage, 650 yards, Jody, 2 games over 300. He's averaging 7 yards per attempt, 7.5 to be exact. He's got 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He has taken 6 sacks. One has to think, with as electric as this receiving core is, seems like they found a gem in Jahan Dotson in this draft, taking him at, I think, pick 17, I think it was. They still have Terry McLaurin. Logan Thomas appears to be healthier than I expected him to begin the season in. Gibson is finally being utilized in the passing game and on the ground. You have to see, there has to be a lot of things that you like in this offense. And yes, this is a challenging matchup against Darius Slay in Philadelphia. But that being said, Wentz also has some familiarity with Philadelphia, and he might be able to exploit this team. I'm not saying it will happen. I definitely think it's a tough matchup for Wentz, but with the weapons that he has, I'm thinking buying Carson Wentz and the season he's having. We talked in the previous shows about Carson Wentz and how he was the front runner for MVP that year prior to injuring his knee and on that goal line plunge, and had he not been hurt, he probably would have won MVP that year. So this is the first time that I have seen Carson Wentz kind of playing to that level of play since that injury, and this is kind of the Carson Wentz that I remembered prior. And quite frankly, the one who I love to watch. So I'm buying the hype right now on Carson Wentz. I think as long as his weapons are able to stay healthy, I think that he has a very good shot at continuing his reign. I'm not going to say he's going to throw 300 yards every game, but right now it's looking pretty damn good. The next quarterback I want to talk about is Jared Goff, one of my sleeper picks in the beginning of the year. Finished the week as quarterback 8, 26.0 fantasy points. You buying or selling the Lions right now and Jared Goff?
You're going to have to you kind of have to say you're buying them just because they're just a team that you really want to root for, because no team over the last decades has had it as bad, or her fans have had it as bad as the Lions have. And this is a team that we talked about this summer with Dan Campbell, how they're building it correctly. From the trenches, they realized when this regime took over that they had a complete overhaul, and that's what they've done. And I tweeted, I want to say yesterday, about Amon-Ra St. Brown. I tweeted the 10 wide receivers that were drafted directly ahead of him in the second, third, and fourth round. It's not to mention that was just a fantastic wide receiver draft class. But 10 guys were drafted ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And if anything, as hard as it is to believe, Rondale Moore might be the best of that 10 that went right in front of him. It was just amazing that they were able to find such a nice find that late into a draft, and how all these other teams just missed on it. But we see that all the time. I think the Lions are built to be quite a really interesting fantasy team for the rest of the season, because their defense, while it has shown some improvement, is still bad enough overall where the Lions are going to be in a lot of favorable game scripts. They're going to be in a lot of shootouts. And clearly they have the personnel both on running back and at wide receiver, and they have a really good tight end as well, TJ Hawkinson. This is the kind of team that can put up points every week. It all falls on the shoulders of Jared Goff. If he can take care of the ball. Billy, you talked a lot about how Jared Goff was one of your guys. I want to say you had him top 20 or around that range, and that
Number
was
20.
That was significantly higher than most people had. And, they ended really nice on a nice little roll last year, and Goff, to me, exceeded expectations. But we've mentioned before that when you look at the career numbers of Jared Goff, they're awfully familiar with the guy we just talked about in Carson Wentz. And I actually looked that up on Pro Football Reference this week. It's pretty striking. They're similar. They came into the league together, and their numbers are they mesh pretty well.
Twinsies.
Kind of.
Yeah, he's quarterback 9 on the year right now through 2 weeks. And a lot of people in here may say, oh, he's gotten lucky. But you look at week 1, they played Philadelphia, and he threw, 2 touchdowns and 215 yards. So we just talk about the hard matchup that Wentz is facing, and Jared Goff has already faced it, had 200 yards, completed 21-37, not the best completion percentage, but had 2 touchdowns, only 1 interception, took 1 sack, only had 16.5 fantasy points. So week 2 definitely bolstered those numbers into the top 10 for quarterback position, but the matchup was much easier as well. So even against one of the tougher secondaries, he fared fairly well, in my opinion. So I think the needle's pointing up for Jared Goff. We have a comment in here that says, ever since Jared Goff got married, he's got a different vibe. The arrow's pointing up. Maybe that's what it is, Jody. Maybe he just found his love match, and he just needed a little flame inside of him to find this flame in the football field. Are you buying it?
It seems like my previous marriage, that the exact opposite actually happened.
So you're buying the marriage vibe here. It's definitely a key factor, you think?
Well, I expect now that I've hit a home run and found a fantastic woman that Billy, you met, and anyone that was at the expo got to meet. And
yep.
Yeah, I imagine when that actually happens, I'll be on Team Golf, and my life will be getting a lot better too.
All right, moving on to running back. We had a few unfamiliar names inside the top 10. Nick Chubb finished number 1. I don't think we need to sit here and debate Nick Chubb. We both think that he's probably one of the best pure runners in the NFL, and just has not been utilized to a true workhorse fashion. But when given the chance, I think Nick Chubb is one of the best running backs in the league. So that's all we're going to say about Nick Chubb. Number 3 running back in week 2 was Tony Pollard, 15.8. That's the wrong formatting. That's standard point. Let me go to half PPR because that's what we're doing in the competition. 17.8, still running back 3 inside week 2. Tony Pollard, selling the hype on Tony Pollard. I know a lot of people had him as a handcuff breakout candidate here. Do you think he's better with Zeke in, or with Dak out, with him in? What's your take on Tony Pollard moving forward?
Well, I would say as long as Dak Prescott's out, that you kind of want to buy Tony Pollard. This is kind of why people drafted him in the range, not necessarily as a handcuff to Zeke Elliott, but as a guy who had standalone value, in particular as a third down pass catcher. And that's what we're seeing here. When you look at the snap counts for Dallas last week and the touches, they're almost split 50-50. And I believe that that's kind of what they're going to lean on while Dak Prescott is out. Since we don't really have a definitive timeline on how long as Prescott is out, I think it's safe to say he's going to miss at least 3 weeks, probably as much as a month or more with the injury that he had. I would say over that time that you could think that Tony Pollard is going to be a pretty dependable and reliable RB2, RB3 on a week-to-week basis. I mean, we're not seeing a whole lot out of the Dallas passing game. Maybe it gets a little better with Michael Gallup supposedly getting ready to come back, maybe on a snap count this week, but that'll certainly make things better. And, Cooper Rush wasn't as bad as we all thought he was going to be coming into the week. I think most of us ranked him as, QB 30 or down towards the bottom last week. But I think in the short term, Tony Pollard, if you were smart enough to get him in the draft, where you got him, you probably going to be starting him over the next month. Now, when Dallas's offense is back to its normal flow or whatnot, we'll see how it turns out. It wouldn't shock me to see Pollard actually start to take the lead reins of that backfield, because we haven't seen much in a couple weeks out of Ezekiel Elliott. Not necessarily all his fault, but Pollard just has simply looked better with the touches he's had this year, and you could probably say that over most of the last 2 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, Tony Pollard's looked explosive. People have said he's been the better back in this offense for the last couple of years. I definitely think he's more explosive at this point in his career than Zeke is, but when you're paying the man that much money, he's still going to get his touches, and even if you don't agree with it, Jerry thinks otherwise. So next running back I want to discuss, and this is somebody who I think I was very wrong on in my preseason rankings, and that's James Robinson. James Robinson had 23 touches last week, 64 yards, so only a 2.8 yard per attempt average, but he did see 2 targets, caught both those targets, 2 receptions for 14 yards. He did have another touchdown on the ground. He finished the week as the running back number 6. I misread the situation. I thought that Travis Etienne was going to be more involved. I thought that James Robinson was coming off that Achilles injury, that he would be eased into things and we would see a lot more Etienne early. I think we saw some drops from Etienne in the beginning of the season that kind of didn't necessarily play into his favor of being on the field more, and James Robinson was able to take advantage of his opportunities. What's your take on this Jacksonville backfield moving forward? Are you in on James Robinson, or do you eventually think that Travis Etienne is going to win the job?
No, I don't see how. I think best case scenario, as long as Robinson stays healthy, I think best case scenario, it'll be a split backfield, but just freaking nature. We saw how debilitating that Achilles injury was for Cam Akers towards the end of last year. And, even in this summer and so far in 2 games, Cam hasn't been able to do anything. James Robinson, same injury. And if I'm not mistaken, it was actually occurred later than Akers.
Whole year.
Yeah, it was like later in the year. And
a full year.
Granted, he had an off season to get ready, but it's just unprecedented to see a back come back this quickly and to be as good as Robinson is. And hey, you mentioned we missed on him. Absolutely. Through 2 games, Jacksonville, I think they're number 12 overall offense. Their backfield has been pretty average. I think they're around 17th in rushing, but they're just a top 10 passing offense. And I think Travis Etienne will be involved plenty. But right now, I don't see why the new coaching staff would go away from what James Robinson is doing. He was great in week 1, and he looked pretty good again last week. So, my expectation is if they both stay healthy, that it feels like Robinson would probably be getting 2/3 of the early down work, and our guy Etienne, he'll get worked in, and he'll come around. He'll get some of these drops under control, and he'll start to become more of a factor. But Jacksonville, then I got some interesting little pieces, and Christian Kirk's another guy that I think I underestimated. I thought that his play would drop off when you go from an Arizona offense with Kyler Murray to one that looked, quite frankly, looked pretty pathetic last year, and Trevor Lawrence definitely looked a little out of his element. But just goes to show when you go from just a horrendous, ridiculous head coach last year with Urban Meyer, and you go to what they have now. You have a coach who's won a Super Bowl in the past, and who has routinely been able to churn out innovative offensive schemes and whatnot. It just goes to show Trevor Lawrence, he's looking good. So right now, I think you can still get odds on the Jaguars to win the AFC South at +2, +250 or +300. And it's like, as bad as the Colts have looked, and the Jaguars have the entire division's only win in the whole year, which is pretty sad. So, yeah, I don't see how you could not buy, on James Robinson at this point.
Okay, I want to answer a couple start-sit questions that are running back related, then we'll move into wide receiver. So if you do have any questions, keep typing them in. We'll get to them eventually. First running back question from Thomas, or Tomas. I don't know if that's Tomas or Thomas. Are you starting Damian Harris this week? It depends who my options are. I don't really trust any New England running back, so I'm going to say no, even though he had a good week last week. I think he was 15 for 71 on the ground and a touchdown. I just never trust the New England backfield. How about you, Jody?
Well, I just realized I haven't seen an injury update on Damian Harris. Has he been practicing?
I haven't seen much on him today.
I've been so busy with our content and, and all that I haven't done my normal research and keeping up with guys. But I would be very skeptical of Damian Harris if he's not participating in practice, because the Patriots, Bill Belichick, are not a team to trust at all. So they may leave him. They may make people think he's a game time decision or he's going to be perfectly fine, and then they have no intention of playing him. Or if he's fully participating in practice or is able to return to practice, say tomorrow, then the concerns aren't too much for me. Yeah, it would depend on your it would depend on your other options. They're playing the Ravens, so the Ravens have been horrendous against wide receivers so far, so that kind of doesn't necessarily play into what the Patriots like to do offensively. But I imagine if Damian Harris is looking like he's going to play, like he's going to be active, he'll probably come out as a lesser RB2 for me, and I probably would rank him around the same level. Maybe it's, with Ramondre Stevenson, that's interesting because the first week of the season, Harris ran all the routes, and Harris was the one who was more active in the passing game, and he still caught a couple passes last week. But what we saw Stevenson with Ty Montgomery at the sideline, we saw Stevenson take the reins to run more of those pass routes, and I believe that's what they're going to end up eventually doing. But that's right now. Go ahead.
Damian Harris in my preliminary rankings on Thursday night comes in at running back 29. Now, these are subject to change with news and everything heading into Sunday, but
right.
But I have him behind, Darrell Henderson, James Conner, Pierce, Jeff Wilson, those type of backs. And, that might change with the news what's going on with Conner and how active he's going to be on Sunday as well. So, but I think that's about the range he'll be. We'll see with any final news and updates, like you said. Another start-sit question we have here is from Connor. Connor says, hope you're both doing well. Thoughts on Chuba Hubbard following the CMC news? For those who haven't seen, CMC has a little bit of an ankle injury. They are expecting him to play, though, on Sunday still. So as of now, I'm just going to say they're probably just reporting the injury and that it's nothing to be alarmed about. But would you be adding Chuba Hubbard in leagues right now over any of those options, Benjamin and Gainwell? For me, I'm going to say
I probably would rather add Deontay Foreman, to be honest. I mean, I think Foreman got 3 snaps last week and Hubbard got 2. So probably if McCaffrey were to miss time, you would see more of a split backfield. But I believe Foreman would probably be the better fit for what they're wanting to do offensively. And I think he's just a better player at this point. So, I suppose if you have a vacant roster spot and Foreman isn't available and Hubbard's out there and you can afford to add him for free from your waiver wire, it's worth it. But I don't think the injury is anything to be too concerned about with McCaffrey right now. It's nothing that I've read that's ringing any bells. Of course, obviously with Christian McCaffrey, injuries are have just become the norm lately, but it doesn't seem like it's anything too serious. So he's not someone I'm real interested in right now. Proactive, sure. If you can afford to squeeze him on your roster and it doesn't cost you anything, you can add him.
Yeah, I'm not adding him for any of those options. I mean, I'm going to keep those options. I like the talents of Benjamin Gainwell better, especially with Connor banged up as well. I think could have a significant role, and I know we saw a lot of Darrell Williams last week, but it easily could be Benjamin as well. So I agree with you. I think Foreman's probably the back, especially the goal line back in that offense. So it would be hard to trust Chuba Hubbard moving forward, even if he is going to be slotted as the starter. You're going to see a rotation in this backfield. So I agree with everything that Jody said. One more start sit, and we'll move to wide receivers real quick. Are you starting Damian Harris or J.K. Dobbins in a half-point PPR? If I had to choose between the two of them, I guess we don't know the official word on Dobbins yet, but if Dobbins is in, I'm probably playing Dobbins over Harris. What about you, Jody?
Agree. Neither guy is really going to do a whole lot as a receiver, in particular Dobbins. If anything, Damian Harris maybe he'll get you a couple catches. But with Dobbins, I would expect if he's healthy that when he's on the field, he's going to be pretty much the guy there because Baltimore hasn't had a lot of success so far in their first 2 games with the little rotation they've run out. Whereas with Harris, he's always going to be splitting reps with Stevenson. So, again, where you had Harris as RB29. I imagine if we hear that Dobbins is going to be active, he'll be in that RB24 to
Correct.
30 range.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So it's all going to break down the news again. Everybody, when we're asking about start sits at this point of the week, we're more than happy to guide you, but just know that so many things can change between now and Sunday. We can give you kind of some preliminary numbers and some things to think about, but if you're on the fence again Sunday, shoot us a message in Discord. You can also reach me on the Grind Time podcast on Saturdays when I do them real quickly. It's like a 30-minute show answering start-sit questions and reviewing injury news, because the final injury news of the week. So those are things that you can always throw there as well. Let's go ahead and move to wide receiver now, Jody. So wide receiver week 2. My boy, I just want to say this. My boy Stephon Diggs was the number 1 wide receiver. I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's go ahead and go to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was wide receiver number 3 in the week. And Amon-Ra St. Brown has been stepping up in a big way. I am glad I added quite a bit of shares of him later in the draft season. I was kind of sleeping on him in the beginning. I got the fever watching I'm blanking on the name of it right now. Hard Knocks. Got the fever watching Hard Knocks. Kind of fell for the Amon-Ra St. Brown, and boy, am I glad I did, because I moved him up my rankings. He was 12 targets first week, 12 targets last week. He already has a total of 17 receptions. He had 2 touchdowns last week, 116 yards. Finished the week as wide receiver 3. Are you buying or selling Amon-Ra St. Brown?
No, you have to buy. I input my rest of season rankings this week, and I've moved him into my top 10. And really, that's what he's done, and that's what he deserves to be. He's a guy that I already have big regrets on this summer for not having him up high enough. Billy, you and I had a little DJ Chark crush, so I think that made me, by proxy, I wanted a piece of the Detroit offense, but I realized that DJ Chark was almost free in drafts. So rather than take St. Brown and where he was being drafted, I was like, well, I'll just wait 5, 6, 7 rounds, and I'll just get Chark. So at least I'll have some part of the Lions. And it's too bad, too, because Amon-Ra St. Brown, just the way he plays, the way he's looked, and like I said at the top of the show, we talked about the Lions. They're going to see a lot of favorable game scripts, a lot of shootout type of games, and you just kind of want to get a little as much of a piece of that as you can. And I have a lot of DeAndre Swift, so I guess in some ways I have my Lions shares in particular in dynasty formats, but I certainly regret that I was a little missed it on St. Brown quite a bit this summer.
Next person I want to talk about is Jalen Waddle, and I feel bad because the first thing I thought about when he was breaking out was we had a start-sit question last week, and here it is from Chris. He called me out on it just now, and he says, wait 1 second, here it is. Are you still thinking Edmonds over Waddle? I told him to play Edmonds last week over Waddle. I had concerns with the offense and Waddle's involvement, because if you look at week 1, he only had 5 targets. He only had 4 receptions. He had, in week 1, 69 yards, but 42 of them were on one play. I was concerned with week 2, and boy, was I wrong. 19 targets, 11 receptions, 171 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. So first and foremost, I want to apologize to Chris. Second, I hope you still won your week, because if you lost, now I feel really bad. But it happens from time to time. We get things wrong, and this was one of the things I got the most wrong last week, was Jalen Waddle. So, Jody, are you buying or selling Jalen Waddle moving forward?
That was tough. If anything, I would say sell still, because I think my reservations of Waddle all this summer were correct, and we saw a little bit of that in week 1, where we have all these other players demanding targets and all that. But with that said, Tua, he's at least last week clearly everyone in Miami exceeded expectations, but we're not seeing what we expected out of Chase Edmonds. And if anything, Raheem Mostert's going to become more of a thorn in the side here, like a legitimate threat to take away from Chase Edmonds having any chance of getting anywhere close to the RB2 that we all kind of wanted him to be. We all kind of targeted him as. I still don't know. I'm still not 100% just on this one flukish anomaly type of game that Waddle's going to be able to continue with that kind of target share and whatnot. I would be safe to say that yes, I'm going to be probably severely underrated with Waddle where my draft rankings were. I'm sure he'll contend probably for top 15 to top 20 fantasy numbers, and I had him outside my top 20. But
Me as well.
like I said, I'm still, and we're not the only ones, but I'm still, like I said, I'm a little skeptical. But well, we'll see this week. They're playing a legitimate secondary, the number one defense in the league right now. So if he manages to come through with another 8 to 10 catches this week, and he's over 100 yards and he gets into the end zone, then we can start saying, okay, well, we missed on Waddle.
Last receiver I want to talk about, well, then we'll answer some more start-sit questions, and then we'll move on to tight ends, and then we'll finalize it with Thursday Night Football. So people can get out of here and start getting prepped on their live stream. Remember, it's not on the TV. Is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson went 8 receptions, 14 targets, 102 yards, 2 scores, Jody, 22 fantasy points, 26.5 points PPR. What's your take on Garrett Wilson? Are you buying or selling him moving forward?
Selling him because I expect that Zach Wilson's going to be back under center in a week or two, and there's no guarantees that what's going to happen at all to any of the New York Jet playmakers at that point. Flacco's been gunning it. Got to give him credit for these 2 weeks. In all reality, if the Jets, fancied themselves as legitimate playoff contenders, and who's to say at 1-1 that they're not, but they could consider sticking with Flacco. That's not going to happen. I believe Wilson, it probably in week 4, maybe week 5, is going to, reclaim the starting role. And then when you look back at his, I won't say disastrous rookie year, but it was pretty bad. And unless he's made drastic improvements in the accuracy department, it's going to be extremely hard for that team to maintain multiple fantasy relevant receivers on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Although I really liked the talent, he was my number 1 receiver in this draft class prior to the draft. After the draft, I moved him down based upon landing spot. I still think he's a very talented back. He was one of the best route runners in this class. Could just go up and make the plays. I really like the talent. Let's hope that he can shine through the struggles of the Jets and that he's able to be quarterback proof, right? Let's see if maybe that is to be determined, but definitely a possibility. But I'm going to buy Wilson right now just because I'm going to go for the talent over the situation, and I'm going to hope that I'm right. So I could definitely see a scenario though, Jody, what you described with Wilson coming back and the offense kind of just takes a bigger shit. So it can happen. Some more start-sit questions here we have from Chris is 2-quarterback league. He's already starting Burrow. He needs to decide between Tua, who's playing Buffalo, or Jared Goff versus Minnesota. Who are you starting?
Yeah, that's something. I probably would stick with Tua. We saw the upside there, and I understand that Buffalo is the number 1 defense. I've talked about it a couple times already on this show, but this game definitely has some potential shootout potential. I just said potential shootout potential.
Too many potentials.
Yeah. This game could, come through and be really entertaining with a ton of fantasy points. I don't think we'll see what we saw out of the Dolphins last week in Baltimore in that crazy fourth quarter. But I couldn't fault you for looking at Goff either.
Yeah, I'm going to lean Tua here as well. I just think in general they're probably going to be playing from behind this offense. If they're playing behind, we're going to see something similar. Not to the efficiency that they had last year versus Baltimore, but I think that they're going to be still playing from behind, and we're probably going to see another couple touchdowns for Tua, and I'm going to lean Tua here in this situation as well. Next start sit question is again from Chris. Flex spot start sit Zeke Elliott or Elijah Moore. Dallas has the Giants. Jets are playing Cincinnati.
Gosh, we just saw Zeke pretty much split backfield reps with Tony Pollard, who appears I think it's safe to say that Tony Pollard, they seem to favor him more in that receiving role. Not that Elliott isn't a credible pass catcher himself, and they just seem like they favor Pollard in that area there. So, if that usage from last week carries over, then you feel like Elliott maybe peaked out at around 15 to 16 touches. And if the majority of those touches are just carries versus targets, whereas with your receiver, you're looking at another game. As long as Flacco has looked as good as he has, I don't know, Billy. That one's pretty close for me.
It is very close. You look at the stats, and Zeke has put up 4.9 fantasy points week 1, 4.9 fantasy points week 2. If you're in PPR, that's going to be 5.9 and 5.9 versus PPR league for Elijah Moore, 9.9, 6.5. I'm going to probably lean Elijah Moore here. It's just because, again, Jets are going to be playing from behind. They're going to be passing the ball. And if you can get a couple catches here, I mean, you're looking at just yardage from Zeke, who, again, Zeke has not been – you hit the hammer on the nail, Jody. He has not been involved as much in the passing game. 2 targets in each game, 1 catch in each game, minus yards in each of those games in the receiving game. So if that's the kind of usage we're expecting, that you hit the hammer on the nail, you said 15, 16. He went 10 attempts week 1, 15 attempts week 2. So let's just call it 15. If he's going 15 for 50 is what he's been averaging so far throughout the season, it's not looking good for Zeke.
He has to score for him to pay off as an RB2. You're gambling completely that he is going to get into the end zone. Now he very well perfectly could.
Yeah, but Elijah Moore, though, could easily have 4 or 5 catches and 30, 40 yards on a low side. And at that point, you're putting up, 7, 8 fantasy points versus Zeke's 5 or 6. So I'm going to lean Elijah Moore in this start set. I think it's close, but I just think with matchups and what's happened, and I'm going to lean towards the Jets here playing from behind. We have a fan here. Billy Jody Live is where it's at. So many people sleeping on us till they recognize that we're his cheat code. So thanks for the feedback, nobody. Really appreciate you tuning in. Let's move on to tight end, Jody. Then we'll come back and circle around some more start-sit questions. We got to kind of start wrapping things up so we can get off and watch our Thursday Night Football, and everyone else in here can as well. Irv Smith finished as tight end number 3 in half-point PPR, 12.1. He caught that touchdown, saved his day, dropped a big would-be touchdown as well. What's your take on Irv Smith in this offense? He wasn't used a lot in week 1. Week 2 came around, and we saw his usage, 8 targets, 5 receptions, only 36 yards, though. What's your take on Irv Smith in Minnesota?
I mean, I still feel like he's a lesser tight end, too. It feels like maybe the fact that Darius Slay was able to mostly contain Justin Jefferson is why we saw Irv Smith get a little bit more looks, because again, complete goose egg in week 1. He had all of 2 targets, and he didn't catch either one of them. So that is, this is a pretty, again, the Detroit, this game with the Vikings, and that's right, the Detroit, Minnesota, right?
Yeah, Detroit versus Minnesota, week 3. Yeah. Yep.
It's got a lot of fun potential, so I can see him being, a guy that will probably ultimately come out this week in rankings at around the tight end 15 range, and I think that's probably about as high as he'll get typically in my projections or rankings on a week basis. It's just because we saw already in this season, we saw the extremely low floor with him getting a 0 in week 1 and then coming back last week, and almost all that production was simply because of a touchdown, because he only had 36 yards. So to me, a little bit volatile, but I can see this being another decent game for him just because of the the potential flow of this matchup.
Okay, last time we're going to talk about, then we're going to kind of hammer through these start-sit questions in a kind of just a quick rapid fire, and then we're going to talk Thursday Night Football briefly. But last tight end we'll talk about Mike Gesicki, 12.1 half-point PPR fantasy points, finishes tight end 3. Are you buying or selling Mike Gesicki moving forward?
Again, that's another guy who did almost nothing in week 1, and then we see this little touchdown show up out of week 2. So what's going to happen this week when you're playing the number 1 defense? Well, we'll see. But at best, Mike Gesicki is, I mean, what would you say? At best, the the fourth option in that offense. So it just depends on what you see this week. If the number one defense is able to contain Miami and the Dolphins are being set up for a huge disappointment after everyone's talking about them this week, well, then you don't want anything to do with Gesicki. But if, like I've implied, this game actually has some shootout potential and Gesicki can be involved, again, he'll come out probably about in the same range that Irv Smith did. And again, these are when you're getting into that tight end 15 to 20 range, you've got guys that are volatile. I'd rather start a guy like Tyler Conklin, who has been consistently staying on the field for like 75% of his team snaps, and he's getting 5, 6, 7 targets a week. I'd rather stay, that slow and steady option like him or a Hayden Hurst, a guy who stays on the field and is staying involved. I'd rather in that approach with the lesser tight end, I'd better go with the more consistent player.
Yeah, it's funny. You look back at the draft, and we've always said, and I've said this time and time again in draft season, is that you can always find an option at tight end position that never seems to be there in the beginning of the season. Tyler Conklin was going very late in drafts, undrafted in a lot of those, where he has saw like week 1, he saw 91% of snaps. Week 2, Tyler Conklin with CJ Uzomah out, saw 100% of the snaps, compared to Mike Gesicki, who saw week 1, he saw 41.7% of snaps. Week 2, he saw 62% of snaps. I don't care about the name. Give me the guy who's going to be on the field, and I'd take Conklin there as well. I just don't trust Gesicki either, and I think you hit the hammer on the nail when you said that he's the fourth option in the passing game probably at best. So I am not buying Mike Gesicki, at least not on the Dolphins. So maybe they'll trade him. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Okay, let's run through. That's enough for the review for the players for week 2. Let's hop into some more start-sit questions here. We'll do this rapid fire. Jody, are you going to start Breece Hall, Edmonds, or Nico Collins here in week 3?
Wow. Breece Hall, Nico Collins, or Chase Edmonds? I'm probably avoiding Edmonds simply because as much as I liked him coming into the season, again, he seems like he's losing snaps to Raheem Mostert, and you're playing the number one defense. So that will make me like Edmonds for all the lineups that I have where he was in my lineup for starting the first 2 weeks. He's been benched now, and that'll probably be applicable for until he's able to come through and see it. Given a choice, I haven't seen anything that I've really liked out of Houston's offense. They're playing the Bears this week, so this is a get-right game for both of those teams. It's critical. Like if for anyone, with Davis Mills, Dameon Pierce, these Texans that have kind of disappointed, this is it for them, and it's the same thing for the Bears. So, who's the other option there?
Nico Collins.
I'm gonna go with Breece Hall. Let's go with Breece Hall. He's still, I understand he's splitting carries with Michael Carter, but I think he kind of. I think he took a bigger piece. If I'm not mistaken, he had a bigger piece of the pie last week versus Carter. So
yeah, he had 7 rushing attempts, 50 yards. He had a good run, 23 yards. He did score a touchdown. He only saw 1 target last week compared to his 9 that he saw in week 1. So he did see a downtick in the passing game, but I agree. I think Hall is probably in a better spot right now to succeed versus those other options. Let's go on to the next question related to Wilson. Trade Jacoby Myers for Elijah Moore this week. Would it be crazy to start Elijah over DJ Moore this week? DJ's been disappointing. I still lean DJ. What about you, Jody?
Well, DJ Moore just scored, so he hadn't been too disappointing, but I wouldn't trade. No, I mean, I like Elijah Moore. We're fans of him, but again, what's going to happen when Zach Wilson is back? Is Elijah Moore going to be able to? We saw them kind of, flash a little bit towards the end of last season, but is that going to carry over? Or, again, I have some reservations there, so I would not trade Elijah Moore straight up for DJ Moore.
Okay, yeah, I'm on DJ Moore's side of this. I don't care how it shakes out. DJ Moore is the better player in the trade. Mike here says, hey guys, thanks to Billy Advice. On Discord, I was able to get Tony Pollard, who to start in PPR, wide receiver 3, Elijah Moore. Man, it's a lot of Elijah Moore today. Elijah Moore, Chris Olave, or Brandon Ayuk?
Having Jimmy Garoppolo back makes Brandon Ayuk a little more interesting, but we probably need to see that play out properly. Chris Olave's interesting. It feels like he's maybe. I think if you look at his air yards, they're like bonkers. So it feels like it's just a matter of time before he has a big blow-up game or catches a long touchdown or whatnot. That said, I'm not the biggest Jameis Winston fan, so I don't know, Billy. Where do you come out on this one?
So Winston's also pretty banged up. They're saying he's got fractured ribs. He's got the ankle injury as well. We might be seeing Andy Dalton this week, they're saying. I'm going to pass on Chris Olave this week. I like the talent, but the situation just has me a little weary. He has, though, on the flip side, just being devil's advocate here, in the combined weeks 1 and 2, he has seen the most snaps out of all the receivers, 75% week 2, 73.8% in week 1. The only person who saw more was in week 2, which was Michael Thomas, who saw 76.5, but Michael Thomas week 1 only saw 60.7. So we're seeing an uptick in usage from Michael Thomas as he gets back into that football shape and on the field and ramps up this offense. So Olave scares me this week. Ayuk, there's not much more to say about Ayuk. I think he's definitely more intriguing with Jimmy Garoppolo on the field, but I still think that the decision here is going to be Elijah Moore. Simply, again, they're playing from behind. He's been involved in the offense, and he has the talent to succeed. Next, start sit. Actually, trade question from Giselle Jones. I have a trade question for you guys in the Discord. Pittman and Dylan for Swift and Jody. Who wins? I'm on the Pittman-Dylan side. What about you, Jody?
Generally in trades, if it feels even, you want the best player. So it just depends on who you view, I think, is the best player here. And I think you could argue DeAndre Swift is probably the best player there. But, we're here at Full Time Fantasy, we're huge Michael Pittman fans. So, what was it again?
It was Pittman and Dylan for versus Swift and Judy.
I probably come out on the Swift and Judy side simply because I feel like DeAndre Swift, it's probably he stays healthy. He's right on the verge of being a top 5 running back, and there's quite a step down for Dylan. Where I feel like with if Judy's healthy, I don't know. I haven't seen too much updates on.
Didn't practice again today, but it's just,
right. So we're
just talking about practice.
Well, I mean. What seems like, they're not too concerned about it, and he's not practicing. Sometimes these type of little things can linger for 2 or 3 weeks, and then before you know it, you just traded for a guy, and 2 or 3 weeks, 0. So I wouldn't see the necessary to pull the trigger right now unless you're willing to take that gamble. But personally, I like the Swift side of it.
Okay, next question is, we got a defensive question here. You want the Bucs defense or the Browns defense this week? Browns, of course, are facing tonight.
Yeah, the Steelers tonight. Windy conditions, possibly. I think they said the wind is like 18 or 19 miles an hour, so that's something to think about.
Bucs get Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, if you're talking like standard scoring where you're hurt by the amount of yardage and points you give up.
I'm going to go Browns defense here. They've actually looked pretty damn good on defense.
Yeah, because, it's almost impossible to rank tonight, to rank Mitchell Trubisky higher than, even if you're really optimistic, you can't get him as a top 25 quarterback in this offense. They've looked, the offense has looked pretty bad, pretty sluggish, and Cleveland's defense has been pretty ripe. I think are they number 1 against the run? I know they're the number 1 rushing team, but I think they've been pretty good at defending the run as well. So, I'd rather take my chances tonight with a windy Pittsburgh offense than seeing if taking a. We're going to see week 1 Aaron Rodgers, which would be good for the Bucs, or we're going to see week 2 Aaron Rodgers, which wouldn't be as appealing.
Okay, we got Hasbullah's in the channel. Have you ever seen this guy on YouTube? Hasbullah. I forget how old the guy is, but he's like the size of an infant, and he's like 30 or 40 years old. I forget the condition he has, but there's some pretty funny content. He runs around and does things that people don't expect a child to do because he looks like a child. And okay, enough about that. Michael Carter, Jerry Jeudy, Curtis Samuel, or Rashad Bateman pick 2. For me, it's easily Bateman and easily Curtis Samuel.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, that's easy. Thoughts on Pitts? Is Pitts the Pitts?
Pitts has been the Pitts so far. This is another team like the Bears and the Texans who happen to be playing each other for Kyle Pitts traveling to Seattle, playing a very vulnerable Seahawks team. This has got to be the get-right game, and it feels like maybe this is a squeaky wheel gets degree situation because we're all talking about how uninvolved Kyle Pitts has been in these first 2 weeks. So maybe he comes through, and this is the week where they really put him as the focal point of the passing offense, like they probably should be doing.
I did a tweet yesterday, Jody, that Darius Slay and Kyle Pitts each had 2 catches last week for 19 all-purpose yards.
Nice.
Just a fun little stat. Pick one, Hunt, Gabe Davis, or Jody. I'm going Gabe Davis all day. He's playing this week.
Yep. If he's active, you're putting him in.
Okay. Wide receiver 2 slot, Jacoby, Jahan, or Doolin. I'm gonna go probably Jahan here.
It just depends on your risk tolerance. He's the upside play. Jacoby Myers is probably going to safely get you, 7 to 9 points, but has almost zero chance of ever getting a touchdown just because the poor guy can't ever score. So Dotson feels like the right play here.
Yeah, Dotson has been pretty impressive as a rookie. I mean, very impressive. He's been running 98% of snaps last week, 98.6. 88.3 in week 1. He already has 3 touchdowns on the season. So definitely I'm an upside player. I'm going to risk it for the biscuit. I'm going John Dotson. Man, another Elijah Moore question. Mooney, Elijah Moore, or Dotson here? I'm going to go Dotson here.
As much as this is a potential good spot for Mooney, you can't put him in at this point anymore. He has to prove it first. I mean, at this point with 2 complete duds, I don't see how you march him out there when you have other options. But yeah, I agree. I'm probably it's probably pretty close between Moore and Dotson. But again, we just talked about the upside and the score potential, and it could be an interesting NFC East shootout there between the Carson Wentz of the past and Carson Wentz current.
Okay. And that was full PPR, as they clarified here. We got a couple more. We're nearing the end of our start sets, and then we're going to just hammer through Thursday Night Football. I'm just going to do rapid fire on that as well. What is this? Always JJ over TJ all the time. I don't know. Okay, we're skipping that. Hasbullah likes the input. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you very much. And then that's it. We're great. Okay, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it on we're great, and we'll talk about Thursday Night Football. So Thursday Night Football is in. We are about to kick off here in about 15 minutes. So I'm just going to run through a couple of these lines. We got Pittsburgh is +4. Browns are -4. Jody, if you're betting on the spread, which side do you like?
I wrote in Thursday preview. I liked the Steelers to cover the number. I probably would have liked the under in this game. I want to say it opened at 40.5 or 41, somewhere there, but it quickly went down to 38, which I typically wouldn't want to play unders for something that low. So I would stay away probably from the total. And I like the Steelers. I think they're I'm forgetting the numbers. It's funny how I had all that against the spread knowledge in my head, but now I've done so much after I wrote the preview yesterday and posted it. I wrote another article, and then I had to edit some other stuff and do dog projections and all that kind of stuff today. So money
line's +170 Steelers, Browns -200. Will you go money line, or are you going to go spread here?
Well, I'll take the. I made the move and it was 4.5, so it's dropped down another half point, which I guess you could kind of say it tells you that you're on the right side. But it's not a game I have a great feel for one way or another. So okay. I feel like I only want to make legitimate moves on games that I actually feel comfortable with. So, but if I was forced to say needed a little something fun to get through the evening tonight, I probably would jump on the Steelers.
Okay, Jacoby Brissett as well as Mitchell Trubisky touchdown lines are at 0.5. Are you going over on either of these? Do either of them get a touchdown?
That can't be right.
Yeah,
0.5.
So one touchdown wins the line. They're both -280, -280, -245.
Over half?
Yep.
That must have the wind must be something more severe than I thought, because I want to say I saw that their lines were at 1.5 earlier in this week or whatnot, but
this is on DK Sportsbook, not a sponsor, but if they want to be, go ahead and email us.
Half a touchdown
Yep.
A big line. Yeah, I would probably move on both of them. I mean, it feels like the guys can punch in a touchdown catch, even in a game with 38 and a half over under. Maybe that's plummeted too. Maybe while we've been on the air, the weather's looked worse. I don't know. But a half touchdown, I'd pick a guy that, in this one. Let's see, Pittsburgh secondary's been worse, so let's move on Brissett.
Yeah, I'm trying to find an update on the wind. So expected to be moving at roughly 20 miles per hour for the entirety of the game. There it is.
Yeah.
That's pretty windy. So that's why the line's there, I think.
You're going to see everyone's projections, in particular for quarterbacks and receivers in this game. You're going to see everyone's projections kind of plummet. So if that's something for people that are fixing to start Deontay Johnson or Amari Cooper, all these guys that are potential in offense, you better temper expectations, or maybe even take them out of your lineups altogether and take your chances on Sunday. Just something to think about.
Okay, we'll do one more line, and then we'll get out of here, let people go watch some football. We have rushing props. Let's see, Kareem Hunt over 42.5 or under 42.5.
Let's see. He's usually more involved as a receiver, but that might not be applicable in this game if they can't throw the ball really well. So, I don't know. It still feels like an under to me.
Okay, and then last line of the night, and then we'll get out of here and watch some football. Nick Chubb, over 83.5 or under 83.5?
Touchdown prop for Nick. Anytime touchdown prop was actually looking pretty good earlier in Discord. So if you're liking his chances of getting into the end zone, you have to like his chances of getting over 83. So let's lean over.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first, guys. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Good luck in your Thursday night football. Jody, as always, thanks for tuning in with me, buddy. We'll see you guys back here. I'll be back on this weekend. Don't know the time yet. It's my son's birthday now. It's a lot of birthdays here in September and October in the Muzio household. So I'm going to squeeze in a podcast over on the coast from my iPad. So you'll see me near the beach. No umbrellas. It's windier in Oregon. So you'll see me doing podcasts over there this weekend. See you guys then. Hope you guys all have good matchups tonight in Thursday Night Football. We'll talk soon. Take care.